Scottish visitor here is going to fly to London tonight. It's just like I told you, the flight in reverse from here to the UK. And he's going to be on the new Airbus super giant jet called the A580, 550 passenger airplane, and it's going to take him 7 hours and a half, he said, like I told you. Right? You're a lucky man. Okay, this is my favorite airplane. This is the famous Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird. This was the principal spy plane of the U.S. government for 24 years, from 1966 until 1990. The plane is a real treasure. It's one of our principal, maybe the principal artifact in this museum. But I want to tell you a little bit about why you have such a kind of airplane as this. This story covers a lot of different years, but it's a short story. And it goes like this. When the United States entered World War I, we discovered right away that one of the most important things that an airplane can do for national defense is to find out stuff. And so for all the years from the World War I, 1918, until the early 50s, we were always doing that mission with any old airplane that was available, put a volunteer crew on it and some cameras and send them off to some dangerous place, and lots of times they didn't come back. Normal people like us never heard that they didn't come back, but lots of them were destroyed, whatever. Crews, planes, all of the above. By the 1950s, I'll bet that some of you of some age know that the Cold War was actually raging, all right? And the problem was that neither side really knew what the other side was doing with the high confidence. The Soviets had the Iron Curtain. We're not supposed to be able to find out what they're doing behind it. We have similar safeguards in place, hopefully, that they can't find out what we're doing. So basically what you've got, in a simplistic way, is you've got two world leaders, each with their fingers on a red button that could blow up the world, without the benefit of knowing what their enemy was doing. See how dangerous that is? So the chances of an accidental war are high. So we couldn't do any more of this crummy surveillance we had been doing before, with attempts at reconnaissance. So the U.S. government assigned the job to the new CIA, just founded in 1947. And the CIA set to do a contract with the Lockheed Company to build them, for the first time ever, a purpose-built, got it? A purpose-built spy plane. So they built the airplane. It was not this one. It was the U-2, of course. You know that. The U-2 was not a particularly fast airplane. It was a subsonic aircraft. I call it actually a jet-propelled glider. It had a great, huge wing. It's still flying. Great, huge wing. And a single person operated it in a fighter-like fuselage, one engine. And they began to fly the U-2 over the Soviet Union. Holy cow, were they ever not welcome. And we found out on the first few sorties through there that their air defense capabilities were much greater than we gave credit for. We were able to be tracked without much difficulty, and that's dangerous. So our analysts discovered that with the kind of results that they were observing there in that finding us, so to speak, they estimated we'd probably only get away with that kind of a provocative overflight for a couple years before we got shot down. Guess what? We got shot down. On the 1st of May 1960, Francis Gary Powers got himself shot down over the Soviet Union. His plane was completely destroyed, and he lived. He got out of it and was captured and held prisoner for a long time. During those 2 years, we didn't just sit home wringing our hands about, oh no, we're going to get shot down. We began a new program. And the new program specs were these. The plane they came up with had to be massively faster than the U-2. As I said, that's not saying much because it was subsonic. It had to fly at altitudes at least as high as the U-2, which were seriously high, okay, 70,000 feet plus, right? And the new spec was really hard. And that was they wanted to limit its observability on radar, and that had never even been said before. We knew zero about making a plane invisible on radar. The engineers basically were given a blank piece of paper and 3 pencils and said, dream up how you make an airplane invisible on radar. Well, they went through a complete design and production program called the A-12 was the aircraft that ended up going into production at the end of it all. And in the early 60s, they began this effort. The plane was the shape of this one, but it was smaller and lighter, and it was a one-person airplane. It, as I said, was called the A-12. The CIA began to operate that with civilian crews, and just about the time that they were about to go really operational, when you shoot a rifle, the muzzle velocity really only makes any difference at the very exit plane of the nozzle. In the first inch, it begins to slow down and go down. Not this plane. This plane can fly at that speed, faster than that speed actually, at the constant altitude for over an hour and 15 minutes without stopping. And that's the way it was operated, full speed. Okay. Wow. A couple of more little funny memory items here for you to take home and brag about to your friends is this plane right here, 972, was given to us by the Air Force when the program stopped, and it had the opportunity to fly from overhead Los Angeles to overhead this airport and do that for SCORE with the federal, with the FAI, the organization in Paris that keeps track of world records. Okay? So on that day, it made that flight in 1 hour and 4 minutes. You can't get from here to the nation's capital in 1 hour and 4 minutes. Try it, all right? All the way from Los Angeles in 1 hour and 4 minutes. The very same airplane was over at Farnborough. You know where Farnborough is? The air show every 2 years, alternating with Paris, right? Okay. So it takes off from Farnborough, has the opportunity to come over London after refueling at speed. So it heads for Los Angeles. So it flies from overhead London to overhead Los Angeles in 3 hours and 47 minutes, the exact same amount of time it takes the supersonic Concorde to get from London to here. These guys are already on the West Coast saying, guys, where have you been? Can you imagine? Wow. For the first 10 years that the Air Force operated this airplane, they didn't want anybody to know how fast it would go. Does that make sense to you? Anybody ever try to shoot something in flight, in motion? Yes. It kind of makes a difference how fast the thing can go, right? We didn't want anybody to know. But in 1976, somehow, they decided to let people know. So there was a flight devoted to another record attempt for this organization in Paris, like I told you about already. Took off, refueled, and went fast. And on that day, July of 1976, the plane went 2,193 miles an hour. World record still stands today. Okay? So what you've got here is, in front of you, the fastest manned jet-propelled aircraft ever. The plane's been out of service for 25 years. The record still stands. The next day, they went up in another SR-71 from the same base in an attempt to demonstrate their altitude capability. And they did this in the serious way. That is, stay there. Not zoom there and fall out of the sky like a baseball, but stay there, say, sustained altitude. So on that day, it flew above 85,000 feet, as long as the people wanted to take records, you know. And so that record still stands today, too. The highest flying manned jet-propelled aircraft ever. Right there. Okay? So then, what else should we say? It's fun to tell you what the plane was by my twisted humor. I say it in the negative. Here's what I want to tell you. The plane never had a gun. It never had a bomb. It never had a missile. It never had any way to defend itself. And it never had any way to hurt anybody. The plane was a very fast, long-range, high-altitude platform. And that platform was equipped with some astonishing cameras of various kinds. One that I am aware of was called a bar scan camera, where it could just search from horizon to horizon and just run continuously. Can you imagine how high you can, how far you can see from 85,000 feet as you're storming along at 35 miles a minute, just photographing the entire everything in good high resolution? But if that wasn't good enough, they had another kind of camera called a technical objective camera, which was able to be installed in multiples on the airplane, and it was hooked up to a computer that would know where the plane was. So the camera would wait till the computer said, "We're coming on it now," would open up its eyes, point to the right azimuth, depress to the right angle, zoom in, take the picture, and then go back to slumber mode, well, until the next target comes up. Okay. Huge resolution on these cameras. The other kind of sensors were these. They had advanced synthetic aperture radar, so they could see all the stuff down there at night or in bad weather. It's great. And the last thing I know about was a bank of flexible, on different missions, banks of electromagnetic receivers that could receive incoming radio / radar / data link, whatever. If they could identify the system, they would enunciate it to the crew. If they couldn't identify it, they could record the data and bring it back for post-flight analysis and maybe make a countermeasure if necessary. Okay? So the Air Force ran this thing for 24 years beautifully. It's good news, bad news. The good news is this, that in all those 24 years and thousands of sorties, thousands of flights, they never had any damage or any loss to an aircraft due to combat action. Not one. That's beautiful, isn't it? You know what's not beautiful? The bad news. In the 32 airplanes that they built, they lost 12 of them during testing and training. Now you have to say they were not being flown by idiots, and they were not constructed by idiots. Everybody was doing their best, but this is a highly exotic aircraft. It's unlike anything else, see? So there were opportunities to mess up, and we messed up. So the airplane was taken out of service, the fleet was taken out of service in 1990, allegedly due to cost. The Air Force was sick and tired of paying for this expensive operation to provide intelligence data for the entire U.S. government, all the facets of it, you see. So the Air Force said, look, we've got other things we want to do with our limited funds. We're stopping paying for this. Good night. It's over. See? So they gave these all away. So we're pleased to have it here. I want you to just endure this one more minute while I tell you that we learned about a new realm of flight with this kind of plane, and that is new to us in basically every way, and it is the exposure to heat. This airplane flies at a tremendous heat due to the compression of the air that it's flying through. I have a map of the temperatures of the outside of the aircraft. You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. The lowest temperature that I know of on this plane outside in high-speed flight is 300 above zero. And the highest temperature I know of is 1,000 degrees above zero on the outside of the airplane. Unbelievable. So if any of you think that there's regular aviation gasoline in there, stop it. Not possible. And if any of you think this plane is made out of aluminum, stop it. Not possible. It's made of titanium, and it has a fuel that is so resistant to ignition that the plane does not even have an electrical ignition system. Wouldn't work. The engines are started with a chemical reaction, basically a chemical explosion, you might say, is how you start the engines. By injecting a fluid into the fuel-air mixture. Every time you start the engine or go into afterburner, you use some of this fluid. A very little, very unstable pyrophoric fuel chemical. Okay. So anyway, I love it. It's exotic. Everything about it is different. If you wanted to know about any particular system, you'd have to tackle me after this is over and I'd tell you more. Let's go talk about the shuttle after your question. What is it? Yeah. Yes. No. It was on film. The big cameras had 10,500 feet of film. Don't know. Probably bigger. But 10,500